the students get to read first this death ritual, which seems very exotic, and gets a reaction out of it, because there's four parts to it, and there's also a little trick in it, because he wrote that the Brawan, he asked questions about the death ritual, so they usually let the body decay naturally.
The Brawan let
the body of their deceased loved one decay naturally. And then there's a section where, after it's decayed, they clean the bones. It takes about 8 months plus the ritual. And sometimes the body is on display in their lounge room as such, inside the house. And then they moved it out, and then they move it back in again, and then they store the remains in vessels. And then one particular feature of it, Metcalf asked, was about consuming the secretions after the body has decayed.
Can you explain that?
So,
what do you mean by consuming the secretion?
When the body's decayed, it's
these bodily fluids leak out. Is that the point?
Yeah. So just the sort of, as part of the decaying process, it becomes, the body becomes liquefied. Parts of it.
Yeah, I think I remember that. Metcalf says, I was told people used to mix these fluids.
I think he calls it the secretions.
Secretions or excretions or whatever they. I don't know.
With
secretions.
Rice.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's naturally decaying.
So eating, basically mixing up
the
decaying bodily fluids with rice and eating them, right?
Yes, and then the Browns said no, their neighbours did it. But upon reading that, the students may not, because the process was so horrifying, right, for us to read it. Oh my God, they may be eating. This is that process. So first, I'm telling you the first step, which is to talk about death ritual, a death ritual that may seem exotic and strange for us. So shocking, right? Something shocking first. So that's the first step. Then the second step, he did in the article, was to talk about how he shared with the Brawan, because the Brawan asked him about the American death ritual, how the Americans do an embalming practice. So, and then he went into detail about the American embalming practice, which maybe we don't actually get to see. I mean, we're probably familiar with the American embalming practice. So it's about having an open coffin. So he's specifically talking about an open coffin. So the American death ritual is that when someone passes away, the way you grieve and mourn is to have
open casket.
An open casket viewing. And at the open casket viewing, you see your dead loved ones, deceased loved ones, usually made up and wearing formal attire. They may possibly had an accident, but that is all
retouched.
Yeah. But it's not only the surface. He then talked about what happens behind closed door. What is the American embalming practice? So to have that open casket viewing, the body is filled with wax, and other sort of embalming practice.
One particular bit I remember was that you talked about to get all the internal organs, the stomach, the liver and stuff. I think they sort of put a blender inside the body and then suck it out through a straw. I mean, maybe there's no blender, but anyway, they suck it out through a straw, and there's all kinds of things I'd never realised that go into those open caskets into preserving the body.
Yes. Yeah. And it's quite an invasive process. So when you read it now, you then become horrified by the American embalming practice, more so what happens behind closed doors that you didn't know, because all you see is the surface.
That's right.
Open casket. The third stage is him to try to get us to understand death ritual that was so horrifying to begin with the length of the process and the decay and the body decomposing and all of that, to understand why that may no longer seem so exotic and why they may think our, or the American embalming practice, as horrifying. So turning the table around. Really, his point in this short article is that anthropology is supposed to be able to explain and cultural practices like a death ritual, explain the meaning, interpret the meaning to us, and also contextualize it, and for us to be able to compare, contextualize, compare with our own, and then for us to be critically reflexive of our own cultural practices. So his point is that there has not been an ethnography, when he wrote this, there has not been an ethnography of an American death ritual. And he said that there should be. He's only scratching the surface. So that Americans themselves can then critically look at their cultural practice, but not only that, perhaps explain it to non-Americans. So that cultural practice no longer become exotic.
So it seems to me like, my understanding is that this is really a crucial part of anthropology, taking things that look apparently exotic and showing how they make sense to the people who do them. Do these practices might seem exotic, and doing that through focusing on understanding how the people understand their own actions, and that through that you develop a sense of reflexivity of looking back at your own culture, considering something like embalming, which I'd just taken for granted and never thought too much about, and having a critical look at it and seeing your own culture as as possibly strange. So for me, that does all the things a good anthropology text should do. But as you mentioned to me, the Metcalf is in fact referred to in a famous piece, which is also popular in undergraduate courses, by a guy called Rosaldo. The title is Grief and a Headhunter's Rage.
Is that with death there is also emotion involved in it. There's the grief aspect. So not just that you could not understand death in a particular culture and the way they deal with death only in terms of ritual practices, but you have to look at the emotions involved. Now he talks about the emotion of rage in grief, and how this emotion of anger and rage compel Ilongot men to headhunt.
Ilongot, the people he studies, right?
He studies. His point is that unlike the Ilongot headhunting practice, which is tied to the emotion of grief and releasing the emotion of grief, headhunting practice as practiced by the Brown and other Southeast Asian, it is as part of the death ritual. And the head is kept, not thrown away. So it wasn't just an act of releasing anger. So it's not just a violent act. It is a calculated act for death ritual, and they also give the head a funeral rite, that clean the bone and all of that. So they make it sacred. Well, he's saying the Ilongot way of headhunting is not really headhunting cultural practice. It's just cultural justification for violence, because the head is tossed away.
Right.
There's nothing sacred about the head itself. Different positions the anthropologists take, the critique they have of each other, and put themselves within the debate. Do they agree with Rosaldo, or do they agree with Metcalf? And be able to argue strongly, or maybe somewhere in between. So it's about using these texts to write an academic level of analysis, an essay.
So when people come to writing an essay, you say if they're going to be writing an essay on these authors, they have to take a position on, you know, either pro Rosaldo, pro Metcalf, or something else, or somewhere in between.
Yes. Yeah. So and talk about ritual. What is ritual? You know, so Metcalf said that headhunting is an important part of death ritual, and he argues that the Ilongot headhunting is not is all about just releasing emotion, not ritual. But then again, you can argue against that because headhunting is also practiced by young Ilongot men as part of initiation rite. So if they don't headhunt, they don't get this special earring that indicates they're a man. Okay. So then can you argue that actually headhunting, not in terms of how it is part of grief, but when it comes to headhunting for young people, that is ritual, even though they toss the head. So then they talk about, you know, different, comparing something that seem superficially, they could say, oh wow, that's a barbaric practice, headhunting. Then they could look at it deeper. What is the meaning behind it? For Ilongot, for Brawan, you know, why is it different?
And the feeling.
And the feeling to do with it. They might be, particular students said, well, actually there is emotion involved in the Brawan headhunting ritual because they have an attachment to these skulls.
Yeah.
These skulls are important. They take care of it. They have a relationship with it. So there is an emotion. So as a student, they can say, well, there is ritual to the Ilongot headhunting, particularly as practiced by the young. And then they talked about, well, you know, before they headhunt, even the older men who are angry, they fast beforehand. You know, there's certain practices that go with it. And then you have celebration afterwards. Isn't that a ritual, a renewing life? So they can see the arguments for and against, and from their own level of kind of analysis.
Great. Well, thanks, Monica. Look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you, Nick, for this opportunity.